What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the After Action Reports. My name is Joshua Joshi Howard, and today we're going to be talking about the most recent GT I went to this last weekend called Merry Slaaneshmas, which was held in Ocean Shores, Washington. Slaaneshmas is a long-standing event that has been pulling players from the Pacific Northwest for a long time. We generally get most people between like Bellingham, Spokane, Portland, and Seattle, and basically everywhere in between. So it's like a really big hub for a lot of different players from the greater Pacific Northwest area to all come together and play at events. And this was my first time attending it, and it was also a very strong version of the event. We had a lot of very good players coming out from all the different areas. Almost every strong player between Bellingham and Portland ended up coming out to this event. I do want to give a big thanks to Jason Bird, the organizer of Slaaneshmas, and has been doing so for many years at this point. The venue was great. There was a snack table. There were some ancillary activities like off on the side that you could go get to. Like there was a tattoo artist. There were people doing demos for different games that they were developing. But I do have a couple of thoughts on the event that made it kind of interesting to me. That I think changes the event from one that could be more prestigious to one that is much more of a vibes-based event, for better and for worse. The first one is that I don't really enjoy it when events release the mission pack after list lock. And the main reason why I don't like that is because it's not so much that good players are not going to be able to play in all the missions, so much as it just makes the possibility of non-games way more likely, especially for armies that rely on having a couple of larger vehicles, like anybody who wanted to play a Land Raider or sometimes a Rogal Dorn, and discovering that they just can't be deployed anywhere on the map that you show up on. Like, these are pretty normal units that you oftentimes see, but they can't play on every map equally. And so not knowing what it is that you're trying to do does make it sometimes where you just find yourselves in a spot where you can't win. It doesn't happen very often, but the fact that the possibility exists always makes it a little sketchy for me. The other one that seems to be part of the Pacific Northwest zeitgeist that I am not a fan of is you did not know what table you were playing on until pairings happened. We knew, or not everybody knew, but there was a statement made in one of the local discords that it was going to be on Games Workshop layouts 1, 6, and 8. And you did not know which table you were going to get until you actually knew what pairings you were getting. And having that extra layer of randomness on top made preparing basically impossible, and also I think increases the odds of getting non-games, because a good matchup in one situation, or a matchup that is good on all kinds of boards, will sometimes just hit boards that are incredibly non-interactive, and because you don't know that you're going to have to play on those boards before you get to the event, sometimes you just find yourself in situations where you just lose. So I'm a really big proponent of release the mission pack and make everybody play on the same table for each round. It really doesn't change that much if you just make day 1 everybody plays the same map, and then day 2 you just change to a different map, and then everybody just has to take an extra 5 minutes at the beginning of the day in order to reset all the tables all at once. But with that said, I still enjoyed the event. I would definitely consider going again, but it obviously changes the way I approach different kinds of events if I'm expecting it to be more of a prestigious event versus more of a I'm going to go hang out with my friends kind of event. So with that said, let's go ahead and start talking about the list that I ended up taking to this event, because it was... And a lot of the decisions behind this list were made partly because I didn't know if I was going to be playing on Table 6, which is very open, or Table 8, which is very closed, at least comparatively, or Table 1, which is somewhere in between. The list that I took to Mugu Games, I think, was a good list and could definitely have had success at this event. However, the list is not quite as good on Layout 8, and the list that I took to Mugu Games didn't have to account for the fact that Victrix Guard exists. So instead, I decided to get a couple of games in with the kind of list that Gustavo de Sousa over in the UK has been playing for a little while, because I think it was more adaptable between different kinds of terrain if you didn't know what you were going to play on, because it has more play on Layout 8 than the one that I took to Mugu. I touched on this list briefly in the meta update video I made yesterday, a couple days ago, depending on when exactly this video comes out, but it has 2 Cadian Castellans, both with Plasma Pistol Power Fist, 2 Cadian Command Squads, both replacing the Power Fist guy and the Flag with Plasma Guns, 2 Ogryn Bodyguards, both with the Forb Invul and the Ripper Gun, 2 Rogal Dorn Commanders, 2 20 bricks of Cadian Shock Troops. I opted to go for the 2 Melta-Guns, but I know Gustavo has been a big fan of the Flamers, 2 units of Catachan Jungle Fighters, 3 Chimeras, all with heavy flamers, 1 unit of 10 Attilan Rough Riders, 3 units of Kasrkin, and then 1 Scout Sentinel. The big tech piece in this army is, of course, the 1 unit of Attilan Rough Riders. As I mentioned in the other video, Attilan Rough Riders do a couple of things. 1, they give you a strong rapid ingress threat, and 2, they trade very point efficiently into Victrix Honor Guard. Guard armies going into Victrix that do not have any real melee threats are always going to be a little bit of a disadvantage going into Victrix Honor Guard, because you allow the Victrix Honor Guard to reactive move towards you more effectively, whereas if you have this melee threat, when they reactive move towards you, it allows the Attilan Rough Riders to get an easier charge off, and Attilan Rough Riders are going to kill about equal numbers of points of Victrix Honor Guard when they charge. So having access to that extra melee punch does force your opponent to respect the reactive forward, and it makes them reactive backwards a lot more often. Other big theories behind this list is the double Cadian Castellan, Cadian Command Squad, Ogryn Bodyguard, and 20 Cadian Shock Troops. It's just a really difficult unit for a lot of armies to remove. And because it's such a large unit that is really difficult to remove, you can do swing charges all over the place. You can tag all kinds of different units all at the same time. And it puts a lot of pressure on a lot of armies that simply cannot deal with that many bodies, almost always having access to the benefit of cover as well. Otherwise, this army is really, really good at just brawling for the game. You have a lot of relatively durable units, you have a lot of flexibility between the Kasrkin and the Chimeras, and you have pretty decent damage kind of across the board. And you have just enough trash in order to create favorable situations that your opponent has to come out faster than you do, between the Catachan, the Chimeras, and the Scout Sentinel. So with that, let's go ahead and start talking about our first game. My first opponent was Anya, and she was playing Emperor's Children Peerless Bladesman. She had 3 Demon Prince of Slaanesh with wings, and I asked her if she had any enhancements, and she told me no, but I see that there are now enhancements in the list, so clearly something that she ended up forgetting about. 2 Lord Cacophonus, 1 Lucius, 1, 2, 3 units of Tormentors, 1 Chaos Rhino, a Chaos Land Raider, 1 big unit of Flawless Blades, and then 2 units of Noise Marines. Now, if you've never played against Peerless Bladesman, it is just worse than Coterie. Whenever you make a charge, you end up getting either sustained or lethal. It's kind of like having Dark Packs, but you don't have to roll for it. And of course, the big threat that a lot of armies may not be able to deal with is the Chaos Land Raider that is containing 6 Flawless Blades with Lucius. And it's a very difficult unit to kill, right? It's toughness 12, 2-up save, and then you have the 6 Flawless Blades inside, who have the ability to wound anything in the game on 3s with a lot of attacks with either sustained or lethals. Anya and I played this one on Purge the Foe, Crucible Battle, and we happened to draw Games Workshop layout 1 for our first game. Now, one of the major decisions you have to make every game with the Cadian Command bricks is whether or not you're going to be starting one in reserve. Because I'm so used to playing with the 20 Death Core of Krieg that would just go hang out here and typically go stand on my natural at the beginning of the game, by default, my inclination was to start both Cadian Castellan bricks on the board, and I would really need a good reason for me to want to start one off of the board. And in general, I think it's a playstyle difference between me and a lot of the other people who have played this in the past. I am very much a player who's just trying to win the game by 1, whereas I know other people are willing to take on a lot more risk in order to get a really big differential. At events where you know the first tiebreaker is going to be battle points, scoring big and trying to drive up the differential makes a little bit more sense. And at events where you know that the tiebreaker is going to be something like strength of schedule or win path, it doesn't matter as much how much you win by. In general, in layout 1, the way that you oftentimes are looking to deploy is you're going to have 1 Dorn start somewhere in here with the idea that it can either go here or stand wholly within this ruin. And then your other Dorn is typically going to deploy somewhere around here with the idea that you can poke out over this edge here, but you also want to be able to take a tread and be able to poke it over this right here so that you can pull this angle, this angle, and then the other really big thing that a lot of people get kind of surprised by is how deep this angle is. So you have this here, right? Where if you are standing wholly within this ruin, you can shoot super deep here, right? You can shoot all the way down, and a lot of people get caught off guard by how deep that angle really is. Then the other major thing you're trying to do is you will generally have like 1 Cadian brick or like 1 big unit kind of hanging out here. You will take another 20-man brick, start it here, and it's going to come over this way. And then your Chimeras will typically start something like here, maybe here if you don't have any Lehman Russes that need to use the gateway, and then you have another one here, and they'll generally stage up here, here, and then something like this, with the idea that you have a ton of threat projection out this way for later in the game. The game that I played up against Anya ended up ending realistically in like 2 turns because Anya started off her Land Raider somewhere over here. And then on Purge the Foe, which is generally one where if you're going first, you have to be pretty aggressive. Anya ended up turn 1 putting the Land Raider right in here. And this is immediately going to be a problem because I'm going to be able to shoot most of my army at this Land Raider if I really want to. And with no other shooting threats against my Dorn, once I deal with this Land Raider and if I can deal with the Flawless Blades inside, I'm going to be in a very, very good position. So in bottom of 1, I ended up taking a Dorn over here, sticking out over here. The Dorn that was starting over here, just like we said, came in over here, hanging wholly within this ruin so I could draw a line of sight here, I could draw a line of sight here. And then a Chimera, which had scouted up previously, came here and also came out over this way. And the Scout Sentinel here plops out something like here in order to shoot a las cannon and hunter killer down there. And in the bottom of 1, between the 2 Dorns and the las cannons that I was shooting out, I killed the Land Raider. And then the Chimera, which was something like this and had got a bunch of Kasrkin out right here, because I had only really spent the 2 Dorns and maybe like a hunter killer from like a Chimera that was like over here as well, and then like the las cannon hunter killer here, all of this was still able to shoot at the Flawless Blades that came out immediately afterwards. So I still killed like 3. I think I killed like 3 of the Flawless Blades immediately after. And so in the bottom of 1, I already killed the Land Raider. I killed about 3 Flawless Blades, and I picked up like, I think there was like a unit of Tormentors or Infractors or something here, where the Kasrkin that were already staged here just came out over this way, killed this unit, and Anya almost completely ran out of ability to deal with my tanks. On the next turn, Anya brought out basically all of her forces, right? There was a Noise Marine unit here, Noise Marine that came out to like here. There was a Rhino that was like something like this, came out over here, dropped Noise Marines out this way. The Flawless Blades came over this way. And then there was like Winged Demon Prince, I think there was another one like here-ish. And I ended up losing like Chimera, Kasrkin, I think most of this Kasrkin unit, I don't even think it was all of it, and like this Kasrkin unit. And then the Cadians that were just still like stationed here, the Dorn, this Cadian unit, basically killed almost all of Anya's army immediately after that. We end up killing the Noise Marines, the Rhino, one of the Winged Demon Princes, I think it was this one. The Flawless Blades were gone, and all of her like normal Marines were gone. So by the time we were getting into turn 3, Anya just had like some, I think it's Tormentors, and like 2 Winged Demon Princes still on the board. And that was basically the entire army. Anya said it was her first time playing up against the Imperial Guard, playing up against the Astra Militarum, and didn't really respect like how good and how powerful my shooting really was. And because of that, I think didn't really have the right game plan going into this game, because I don't think the Land Raider is ever really supposed to be over here. I'm pretty sure almost all the time you're actually going to be starting the Land Raider like here, with the idea that it's going to advance and hide here on turn 1 if you're going first. Because from here you have so much threat projection with your Flawless Blades coming out this way, coming out this way. They can advance and charge. You can move the Land Raider and use the assault ramp so that you can like move the Land Raider, get guys out, and then charge immediately after that. But by having the Land Raider come out over here and inviting both Dorns to shoot at it right off the bat meant that the really big hammer piece, the really big threat that you can use to deal with a lot of different armies and create a lot of threat on the board, end up evaporating almost immediately, and then there just was not enough follow-up to really do anything. I ended up winning this game 93-49. And I had a conversation with people on Reddit about like deploying incorrectly and like how you're supposed to go back and forth with your deployments. And there are ways to like win and lose the game at the beginning during the deployment step. And I think this was one of those games where, because Anya didn't really understand what my game plan was and how, not necessarily easily, but how plausible it was that I could just kill a Land Raider, Anya ended up not giving my army enough respect for the amount of damage that I could really do. Because of that, I lost way too much not understanding what I was trying to do with the game. That said, I had a good time. We had a couple really funny moments where a unit of Noise Marines that was here just killed a unit of Rough Riders in Overwatch with no access to rerolls, just rolling a ton of sustained hits because of Lord Cacophonist. But after that like one moment of bad dice, the game was never really in question. So shout out to Anya, relatively new player, had a gorgeous Emperor's Children army, and hopefully this was a couple of good lessons in how to approach the guard matchup for next time. For my round 2, I ended up playing up against Max and his Ultramarines Gladius, and it was a very unusual take on how people have been playing with the Ultramarines Gladius. He had the Apothecary Biologist with the Fire Discipline Enhancement, Captain Sicarius, a Lieutenant with Combi Weapon, Marnius Calgar, and Uriel Ventress. He had 1 unit of Intercessors, 1 Impulsor, 1 unit of Aggressors with the Fragstorm Launchers, so a lot of extra shots attached to the Apothecary Biologist, who gives them, like, sustained or something. I don't remember exactly what it was. 3 units of 3 Centurion Devastators, 1 unit of Company Heroes, 1 unit of Scout Squad, and then 2 units of Victrix Honor Guard, one of which had both of the unique guys that you could put in the Victrix Honor Guard units. Now, this is obviously fairly different from a lot of ways that other people are been playing the Victrix. One, you don't typically see 3 units of Centurion Devastators in a lot of these Ultramarine lists. You are typically seeing, like, maybe a Repulsor, a couple of Predators, but far and away, I've been seeing, like, way more Ballistas and or Vindicators in these style of lists. And then the Aggressors is an interesting unit that I'm curious how it does in a lot of other matchups, but I think was uniquely suited to actually playing up against my list because of how many shots it can put into a Cadian brick. Max and I ended up playing this one on Scorched Earth, Tipping Point, and we once again drew layout 1. Max is a really funny guy. He is a Giga Memer, but he also plays some pretty darn good Warhammer. My deployment was mostly the same. I had like a Dorn hanging out over here, another Dorn over here, but because this board is really open and I wanted to have a little bit more threat later in the game because it was Scorched Earth, I ended up reserving both the Rough Riders and one of the Cadian Castellan bricks. One of the bricks, I ended up having a couple of guys over here and then like stringing the rest of the unit out to be over here. Then it was like Chimera, Catachan, something like that. And like a Scout Sentinel started here and ended up scouting into here. Max put like 1 unit of Sent Devs here, like another one, something like this, and like the other one here. The unit of Aggressors was in reserve. And then there was the Impulsor here with Cato Sicarius and the 6 Victrix Honor Guard. And then there was like another unit here. He had like Intercessors, Scouts. I don't remember exactly where the Scouts were. Max decided to take this game and force the issue almost right away. So the Impulsor that started here scouts forward, ends up getting the guys out, and then they end up charging like the Scout Sentinel that scouted to here, and then the Impulsor ended up hanging out over here. And so the guys were something like this, and because they are attached to Cato Sicarius, who gives them the flat 6 reactive move, they were always going to be ready to jump back in their Impulsor depending on what kind of threat I put at them. And this forces the issue almost right away, because this Victrix unit is going to be in a spot where, unless I command touch this objective in a really, really scared way over here, he's almost always going to be able to reactive move either directly towards me or to hop back into the Impulsor. So I had to do some creative problem solving. A rule of thumb whenever you're playing up against something that has a reactive move that you know you're going to need to trigger is you want to trigger the reactive move first. You want to see what the reactive move looks like so that you can plan the rest of your turn around it. Alternatively, you don't want to trigger it at all. But this being on Scorched Earth and me needing to at least threaten to stand on this objective a little bit, I needed to stand on the objective in a way that was going to trigger the reactive move. What I chose to do was I took a Chimera and I stuck it something like this, with the idea that it could barely see the Impulsor, and I still had the option to disembark Kasrkin over this wall to see the Impulsor and potentially shoot at the guys if I kill the Impulsor and they go backwards. Now this, I think, in retrospect, was a really big risk, because the Victrix can, of course, reactive move towards the Chimera and guarantee that they're going to be able to impact the Chimera on a Blood Surge. And then I would only get one activation. I would either have the giant Cadian brick over here with all of the Melta Plasma, Lethal Sustain shooting at it, or I could get the Rogal Dorn to shoot at it with +1 AP, try and kill it that way. And then whatever was left, I was going to be able to take the Chimera, because I would leave the guys inside at that point and use either the Plasma or the Melta, depending on how many wounds I had done previously with the Rogal Dorn or with the Cadians, in order to try and deal with the guys that were now in combat with the Chimera. and depending on how much damage I did from that, I could potentially try and charge it with the Cadian Command Squad, because I still had the several power fists in the unit between the Cadian Commander, the Cadian Castellan, and the Ogryn Bodyguard with the Ripper gun. So it was very plausible that if I charged the unit, I still kill like one. So it's still very plausible that if I charge the unit afterwards, I can still kill like one in melee. However, Max chose to take the Victrix that were here, and they retreated into the Impulsor. Now this changed the game pretty heavily, because if the Victrix had chosen to reactive move this way, I can put my Dorn something like this, maybe wholly within here, but hiding from this angle. Or I could put the Dorn like here, where it would be possible, or I could put the Dorn here where it would be possible for like Centurion Devastators, but probably only one unit to come out and poke their heads at this Dorn. But instead, by taking the Victrix and going backwards, he forces the Dorn that was somewhere over here to instead come out over here, where it ends up getting stuck. It can't actually continue going this way because it got caught in the terrain, but it was still able to see the Impulsor over here. And then the Cadian break that was staged up here originally comes out, touches here, makes sure that they can get all of their special weapons to shoot down this corridor as well. The Kasrkin that were in the Chimera hop out so that they can see this over here at the same time. And notably, if I kill the Impulsor and the Victrix hop out, they will no longer be able to Blood Surge, because it is not something you can do while Battle Shocked. And when you fall out of a transport, you become Battle Shocked. So when we get to the shooting phase, I end up killing the Impulsor, and the Victrix end up spilling out something like this over here. And I end up killing every single one of the Victrix Guard, and so this ends up being only Cato surviving in this unit. And so the texture of the game very quickly becomes there is Marnia's Calgar and a big group of other Victrix Honor Guard over here. He's got all of Centurion Devastators, and he's got the Aggressors still in Deep Strike, which they got from Euro Ventress. And this, once again, became one of the weirdest Scorched Earth games I played in a long time. Because for his response, Max took like one unit of Cent Devs, one unit of Cent Devs. They both came out over the wall here. Marnia's Calgar and friends like zoomed out this way. He dropped the big unit of Aggressors over here, and then this unit of Cent Devs came out over this way in order to deal with, like, I think I had like Kasrkin and like a Chimera that had popped out onto this objective. But Max very heavily concentrated his forces over here, and the first Cent Dev unit that shot at the Rogal Dorn over here, he pops Storms of Fire for the +1 AP and ignores Cover Wall and Devastator Doctrine, and just kills it with 3 Centurion Devastators. Even with Oath of Moment and Storm of Fire, that's not supposed to happen through smoke, so I instantly go, oh no, what is about to happen? It's also worth noting around this time that I end up rapid ingressing Rough Riders over here with the idea that they are going to try and take on Marnia's Calgar and friends. Probably not kill the whole unit, but at least do some serious damage to it. It's also important to know around this time that Marnia's Calgar and friends, who I believe were actually like hiding here, when they came out over this way, I get an Overwatch off, and I think I killed 2 of them in Overwatch with the Cadian Brick. But because of this overwhelming force that Max puts on this side of the board, instead of playing a game where it's like, I control this triangle or try to control that, and then Max tries to control this triangle, the game switched into, this is mine, and then later on turn 3, when I rapid ingress the giant Cadian Castellan Brick over here, it's this and this are my objectives, and Max is playing for the top left and his home. And because Max has like all of his aggressors and like what's left of the Calgar break after my next turn is shooting, and like the Centurion devs like here, and all of his army is basically over here, and all of my army is basically playing over here, we kind of stop interacting after like turn 3. I end up killing like Calgar. Max's units are too slow to come like over to this side of the board, and my units are too slow to go fight him over on that side of the board. So we end up like dueling in this firing lane for a little bit. Marnia's Calgar ends up like fighting and dying over against like Catachan and Cadian Castellans or whatever. And the game is super, super close this entire time. Now I remember saying at one point to Max, because I had like a shattered unit of Kasrkin, I had like 2 guys or something here, and then later I had like a unit of Catachan which went over to go kill Calgar. If either one of these units had died and I got the reinforcement stratagem off, I think I would be in a very comfortable place going into the last couple of turns. However, Max did a really good job trying to shatter them but not kill them, because he left like this Kasrkin unit with like, I think it was like 2 guys. He shot exactly enough aggressors to leave like this Catachan unit with like 3 guys, and then they both battle shocked, meaning that I never got a good reinforcements off because I was needing my CP for other things earlier, and by the time I had the CP bank to try and get the reinforcements off, everything battle shocked. But the game came down to a final turn 5 where I needed to draw cards well enough to win. And what I ended up drawing was I had Area Denial and Storm Hostile Objective at the very end. And Max had like 1 Centurion Devastator left. I had a Chimera. I had like 2 other Centurions over here. He had his like big brick of aggressors somewhere over here, and like intercessors standing on his home. I had the really big Cadian Castellan unit, which had basically taken no damage at this point, which was able to stand on this but not out OC my opponent on the objective, and also needed to take like a 4-ish inch charge into the Centurion Devastator to not only get Area Denial, but also take the Storm Hostile objective. And if I got big Area Denial or small Area Denial and Storm Hostile, I would end up winning the game. So when I came over here, Max ends up doing his reactive move to move the Centurion within range that I would not get Area Denial at all unless I killed the Centurion Devastator. Luckily for me, I rolled really hot on all of my melee. I did a little bit of damage with some other like shooting prior to that, and I was able to kill the Centurion Devastator in melee at the very end. Meaning that I barely pulled this one out 78 to 73. I think the biggest thing that probably would have changed the game, of course, is of course the Victrix right at the very beginning, where they chose to go back into the Impulsor over here, which dragged my army out to playing a high interaction game with him. But because the rest of the army was too slow, and I decided to not just fight him on this side of the board, but instead to go fight him where he was relatively weak, because there's like 3 Cent Devs over here dealing with this side of the board like at all. I was able to opt into a relatively low interaction turns 4 and 5. And with an army that more consistently scores cards than my opponent does because I have more units available to me, I was able to pull this out because I drew better on cards. But it was a really fun game, really tight game. Victrix are really, really good, so I'm really looking forward to the slate when they end up getting nerfed. But yeah, really weird game. I think there is a world where I probably could have played a higher interaction game by taking the Cadian Castellan unit and rapid ingressing it over here instead of over here. But that's probably a big playstyle thing. I almost always prefer to take the relatively stable line because I really did not want to let this Cadian Castellan break get overwatched effectively by the aggressors. For my 3rd game of day 1, I ended up playing up against Bailey and his Astra Militarum combined arms. Yep, it was another mirror match. He had Gaunt's Ghosts, 2 Rogal Dorns, he had Melt the Guns instead of the extra Stubbers, Ursula Creed, Cadian Shock Troops, 2 Tauroxes, 1 Cyclops, 1 Field Ordnance Battery with Bombasts, 3 units of Kasrkin, 1 Luminar's Battle Tank with Heavy Bolters, 1 Luminar's Vanquisher with all Heavy Bolters, and then another Rogal Dorn Battle Tank also with the extra Meltas. Now, if you take a look at the list that Bailey brought versus the list that I brought, Bailey hard wins the shootout. I have 2 Rogal Dorns. He has an extra Luminar's Battle Tank, an extra Luminar's Vanquisher, and an extra Rogal Dorn Battle Tank. He is going to win the just raw shootout every single time. However, I have way stronger midboard than Bailey does. He does not really have the tools necessary to get me off of objectives except by killing me off of them. That's going to become really big when we start talking about this game. Bailey and I ended up playing this one on Linchpin, Tipping Point, and we happened to get Layout 6 for this game. My general game plan whenever I'm playing a guard mirror where I win the mid-board fight but I don't win the shooting fight is I'm going to try to win the game on primary. So in order to do that, my general game plan was I was going to try and create like a screen here. I would love to get some kind of screen over here, and then I would have guys hanging out here, and I would constantly launch assaults onto this objective over this wall. Unfortunately, this board is not one where you can really do resurrecting tricks in order to hold the middle, simply because this distance is too far, and you're going to have to leave enough guys out here that your opponent's going to get at least one pretty good activation into the unit, and you will not be able to res guys onto the center. The other way that I tend to like playing Layout 6 is there's not a lot of places where you can put vehicles where they are going to be relatively safe. The general places where you can like put big units like Rogal Dorns, you're going to be able to put one here, and then You can oftentimes put one like here, depending on exactly like how you arrange it. There's usually a way to do it that's relatively safe, but then that's eating up a lot of really important deployment space for things like your Chimeras, your Catachan, or other things that want to use this spot here in order to stage, in order to launch these assaults on this objective. So what I tend to like to do is you generally have to pick, do you want to be in this firing line or do you want to be in this firing line? And I will generally opt to put my other tank something like this, where I am accepting that I'm going to be in this firing line. However, it's not common to get shot by more than like one vehicle here. Also, because this one was on layout 6, and my opponent didn't have nearly as many screens, I chose to put both the Rough Riders and the Cadian Castellan brick in strategic reserves for this game as well. I ended up going first in this game, which generally means that I am going to better be able to suppress my opponent's primary, but it does mean that I have to take some risks in order to create pressure on the board. And the way that I chose to do that was Bailey had both of his Toraxes basically hanging out here at the very beginning of the game. And I started my Scout Sentinel here, and a Chimera basically right behind it, Scout 9, Scout 6, and I drew no prisoners, bring it down in top of 1. And what I really wanted to do is I wanted to eliminate one of these Toraxes top of 1 to limit Bailey's ability to play on this side of the board with any kind of OC. So I took my Scout Sentinel, it came out this way so they could draw line of sight on the Torax, and this Chimera came out over here standing on this objective. Now, I did make a small positioning mistake with this Chimera. Because my opponent wins the shootout so hard, I will basically never be able to control this firing lane. Because Bailey with like a Rogal Dorn commander, something like this, a Vanquisher, and then a Lemur's battle tank in some order over here. He had like, I think the other Rogal Dorn battle tank here, and I think the other Dorn was something like this. I can never fight for this firing lane, which means that this Chimera should have been a little bit farther back so that ideally I can try and disembark guys over here, or maybe a tiny bit farther forward so I can try and disembark guys over here where they are harder to shoot for Dorns, where they are more difficult to get lines of sight to. But regardless, I take my Scout Sentinel coming out over here, I take the Chimera, and they all try and shoot at this Torax, and I leave this Torax on 1 wound. So I go, well darn, I really want to get this Torax gone so I can limit my opponent's mobility. And I also really want it dead so that I can get 6 points for it, right? The no prisoners and bring it down. So immediately afterwards, I take the Scout Sentinel and I charge it in. I think I needed like a 5. And then I even spend a CP on Tank Shock in order to try and get that last wound off of the Torax. And I don't get it. Sentinel swings, Sentinel misses, Torax is still alive on 1 after the shooting, the Tank Shock, and the fighting from the Scout Sentinel. So I instantly think, crap, I've devoted a lot of resources. I have put the Scout Sentinel, I have put the Chimera, and a unit of Kasrkin, all to try to kill this Torax to limit my opponent's mobility on the board. I'm going to lose all of it immediately. And spoiler, I do end up losing all of it on the next turn. The one saving grace, though, is that because I end up discarding no prisoners, I do use the Chimera to overwatch the Torax when it falls back. So I do end up getting the kill on the Torax, so I do end up getting my 4 points to bring it down, but it's cost me 2 CP at this point, and it's cost me like 200 points of my army in order to take this thing down. The other thing that makes this game very, very scary for me is because I have this Dorn that's like hanging out over here, I have to kind of accept that it's going to be visible in either this angle or in this angle. I maybe could have gone a little bit farther this way to be safe, but then my opponent can still just take like Dorn, and they can come out like this way, or like this Dorn can come out and just start the shootout in ways that I don't really want. And so what Bailey chooses to do is he takes like the Lemur's battle tank that's here, and I think this one was the Vanquisher, and Bailey brought both of them out this way. And my first thought was, okay, the only gun that either of these tanks have that are any threats to the Rogal Dorn at all are they both have a Hunter Killer and then the Vanquisher Cannon. In my mind, I know that this is a trade that is not likely to go well for Bailey. But he opts into it anyway. Vanquisher goes through, lines up a shot, bang. Between that and the Hunter Killers, this Dorn is set to 6 in the bottom of 1. And I go, oh no. I'm already in a position where I'm going to be losing the shootout part of this game. And Bailey has made that even more of a problem because one of my Dorns is going to be combat ineffective very, very quickly. From here, the game more or less becomes, I need to make sure that Bailey scores no primary until turn 5. On subsequent turns, I take Catachan, come over here to deny this from my opponent. I rapid ingress horses over here in order to deny this from my opponent another turn. And the horses actually survive well enough that they are able to end up denying this objective for 2 turns. So it ends up getting... So I end up holding Bailey to 3 on turn 2, 3 on turn 3, and 3 on turn 4. This one was Catachan, and these two were both Rough Riders. Meanwhile, I needed to guarantee that I held this as often as possible. Luckily, I was left with like 2 Catachan on here earlier, and I believe I spent my insane bravery to make sure that I held this objective. But in bottom of 3, I end up rapid ingressing the Cadian Castellan brick over here as well, getting them ready to just charge over out this way. Other things that happened, Bailey took the 2 Leman Russes that were over here. He didn't move either of them because he didn't want to get either of them overwatched, and ends up killing this Rogal Dorn, I think, on turn 2. But the other major thing that Bailey does is, in a bid to try and force me to play the game with him more effectively, he takes this Rogal Dorn, and he ends up putting it on this objective. I believe it was on turn 3. During this time, I had my Cadian Castellan break, the one that started on the board. They were all staged up in this area, kind of waiting for this to happen. Because around the same time that this Cadian Castellan break is hanging out over here, this one goes in and is able to charge off this Rogal Dorn and swing out like all the way like this. And I believe I tag a Kasrkin unit and like one other thing. I swear I tag like 2 other things. I think there's like a Kasrkin unit and like Gaunt's Ghost, or maybe like another Kasrkin unit over here or something like that. And because at this point I've also cleaned up this Leman Russ and this Leman Russ, my Rogal Dorn is just hanging out over here in such a way that it can't get shot until you get to like here. And ultimately, my game plan of trying to keep Bailey to basically no primary the entire game ends up being fairly successful. Because I hold my home, and usually this one, I think one of them was actually here at one point, but I end up getting an 8-8-8-8, and at the same time, Bailey ends up going 3-3-3, and then end of game getting a 13. So I end up getting, so Bailey ends up getting 22, and I end up getting 32 on primary. And just like I've constantly said, the whole goal of so many of my games is I just want a 10-point lead on primary, and then cards can be what they are. I not only had a 10-point lead on primary, but I also, because I not only had a 10-point lead on primary over Bailey, but I also had just way more stuff in order to do a lot of these action secondaries and a lot of secondaries throughout the game, because I was creating so much pressure in the middle of the board on primary and on board control that Bailey was not able to score a lot of the cards that he really wanted to. So this one ends up being a win for me, 71-50. This game, I was definitely a little stressed from the beginning because the Vanquisher just doing a ton of damage to my Rogal Dorn, and the fact that I committed so much of my army to try and kill a Torax and wasn't even able to do that, meant that I was pretty worried for my ability to actually play the middle of the game effectively. But luckily, even with like the triple heavy bolter Vanquisher, the triple heavy bolter Leman Russ battle tank, they really did not have the volume, and they did not have the ability to really shoot at the Cadian Castellan bricks. And so these Cadian units end up becoming nearly immortal throughout the course of the game. But shout out to Bailey, this was a really fun game. But if you live anywhere over in central Washington, Bailey's got a store over in Ellensburg that he runs with Nicholas Fromm. Both a couple of great guys, both really good competitors. Really recommend checking out everything that they do over there. The next day, I come back, and immediately after playing against Bailey, I play up against his business partner, Nicholas Fromm. Now, Nick's a great guy. He's played for Team USA in the past, and this time around, he's been playing Aeldari Aspect Host. His list is Asterman, the Avatar of Cain, Fuegan, Janezar, Lycus, a Wave Serpent, 1 unit of Dire Avengers, 10 Fire Dragons, 1 unit of Howling Banshees, 2 units of Rangers, 1 unit of Striking Scorpions, 3 units of 5 Swooping Hawks, and then 3 units of 5 Warp Spiders. Now, the big interesting thing about this, of course, is the Avatar of Cain. Not something that you tend to see all that often in Aspect Host lists. However, from what I understand, this was Nick's goal to try and have something that is going to cost-effectively deal with Victrix Honor Guard. It's still toughness 11, so the strength 5 on the Victrix means that they're wounding on 6s, and it still halves damage, so the AP... And it still halves damage, so the damage 2 coming out from the Victrix is going to be going down to damage 1, which is very difficult for the Victrix Honor Guard to cost-effectively actually chew through this unit. And then when the Avatar sweeps back, he's got a lot of attacks, and they could be d6 plus 2 damage, so each one is likely to be killing a Victrix every time he fails a save. Nick and I played this game on Hidden Supplies Crucible Battle, and we happened to draw layout 6 for this mission. And I think that layout 6 is one of the big things that made this game way more in my favor than if we had been playing on layout 1 or 8. Because these objectives here, you have one that's like here, and it like just barely like kisses the edge of the footprint here and like slightly overlaps here. So it's more or less in the open. And the same thing, of course, over here on this side. Basically in the open, there's like a tiny spot like here, maybe to stand, and that's really about it. So as long as you're blocking off the rapid ingresses, there's no way for anybody to really stand on this in a way that is effective. However, as the guard player with access to reviving models, I can go ahead and take a Cadian unit, and I can stick like, 2 guys here, and I can set it up such that I have like 2 guys here to guarantee that I can res guys onto this objective. So if you end up shooting, so you can't really take this objective by shooting me off of it, you have to be putting OC onto the objective or threatening to come like over this way and tying up the unit effectively. Now, some of the really important things to try and think about when you're playing up against Aeldar is, of course, the Wave Serpent. Where is the Wave Serpent? Where is Fuegan? Where are the Fire Dragons? Where can they get to? And Nick initially deploys the Wave Serpent in here. From this position on turn 1, this Wave Serpent can't really threaten anything that's hiding like over here or anything like deep back here. And we're going to track where the Wave Serpent goes. I ended up going first on this mission, which is sometimes good, sometimes bad. If you are a better primary army on Hidden Supplies, you generally want to go first. And if you are not a better primary army, you generally want to go second. And a big reason for that is on Hidden Supplies, whoever is better able to stand on circles can rack up a ton of points very quickly if your opponent can't deal with you. I have tricks by which I can stand on objectives in the middle. I have a lot more bodies, I have a lot more OC, and so I can fairly comfortably stand on this objective and stand on this objective, and then we can at least roll some dice to see if I'm going to be holding those objectives or not. Whereas on the other side, Nick can try and stand on this objective, but standing on this objective is just asking to lose models. And I think there are 3 key moments that really happen in this game. The first one is I end up putting a unit of 10 Catachan basically as hidden as they're able to be on this objective. And at the same time, in the top of one, I end up doing the thing where I talk about where I get like 2 Cadians touching here, and then like a couple of friends here to make sure that I can res more guys, and then the rest of the Cadian break is more or less standing back here. Because the Wave Serpent is over here, I was able to deploy the Dorn relatively aggressively over on this side, because the Wave Serpent can't get to it on turn 1, and the Avatar of Cain, if he wants to like deploy it on the line and go second, I'm going to take like a third of the Avatar of Cain in long range shooting, and then it's going to be like a grenade and like 1 more activation away from dying. He can't really afford to take this Avatar over here in order to create that same kind of pressure, so he's just like not shooting on this side of the board that the Rogal Dorn is ever worried about. So Nick starts off, he takes like a unit of Warp Spiders, and they come out over this way in order to try and deal with the Catachan that are on this objective. And he low rolls. It's supposed to be like fairly close as to whether or not these Catachan are going to survive or not going up against a unit of Warp Spiders. But because Nick low rolls, I end up still having like 4 dudes still standing on this objective after the Warp Spiders shoot, which is a pretty big low roll. But because I'm also standing there and Nick was not willing to spend the resources to get me off of this objective, and he also never put anything on this objective, I end up holding 1, 2, and more, because Nick was only holding 2 objectives. So I start off, I get a 15, and I also hold Nick to a 0 on primary, because remember, you do not count your home except for hold more. The other thing that happens in the bottom one is the Wave Serpent comes somewhere over here, puts out Fuegan and the Exarch, and in order to get this Chimera over here, because I had marked Rangers on this objective for Marked for Death, he is able to take this, shoot them there, and then Acerman, all over on this side, able to finish it off with a couple of death wounds. And then this hides back here, they hide back in the Wave Serpent. Now from here, I was looking at what I wanted to do with the Dorn that was over here after he has the Wave Serpent here. And what I had done with my measurement is I looked at the fact that the Wave Serpent, if it came over here, he was going to only be shooting long-range shots at me with Fuegan. Even if he rolls really high on his star engines, he's going to be at a position where he's only going to be taking the D6. He's not going to be getting like any of the Melta extra damage coming out from any of the fire dragons. However, if he rolls a 6 on his star engines, what I had measured previously was that the Wave Serpent could be right about here, and then if he like no overwatches his guys, he could get enough guys into like wholly within here and over here that at least Fuegan and the Exarch could be set up in such a way that they were going to get all the extra Melta damage when they shot at the Dorn. And I said to myself, that's good enough. I'm going to have to be in a position where if you roll a 6, you can put both Fuegan and the Exarch into my Dorn with all the other crazy Melta that goes along with it. With the fact that I got a 15 and Nick got a 0 on primary, and the fact that I was threatening another 15 on primary compared to his 0, maybe 5, Nick decides the very first thing he's going to do on his turn is he's going to roll the star engines. And what do you know, gamers? He rolls a 6. We do a little bit of finagling, like where exactly can this Wave Serpent go? Where can we set up the Fire Dragons a little bit in order to try and make sure that they can get as many good targets as possible? Because I had like a Chimera somewhere in here, and there's like a Scout Sentinel here as well. And then we do a little bit of finagling, and then we also figured out that like if the Wave Serpent takes all of its movement, I can get an Overwatch off of it with the Dorn, which is not likely to kill the Wave Serpent, but if I do end up killing the Wave Serpent and Fuegan and friends Battle Shock, not only do they not have a Wave Serpent to return to, so they are going to die immediately afterwards, at which point there is no threat to my other Dorn in the game, but they will also not be able to pop the Sustain strat and the Ignores Cover strat that you can do in order to make killing the Dorn way more likely. So by taking a half-inch less of movement, Wave Serpent no longer able to be Overwatch, still able to get Fuegan and the Exarch to shoot into the Rogal Dorn. At this point, Nick says, if I'm going to do this, I need to take an all-in. I need to just go with all of my army, see what I can do to take you out. So Avatar over here comes over this way and ends up charging some Kasrkin. Lycus hops out and ends up like over here, takes a couple of guys. And then there's like some Swooping Hawks. Jane Czar and the Banshees come out over here. I think there's like some Swooping Hawks that come out like over this way that end up like shooting at the Cadians or something like that. And so most of the assets from Nick's army come out right away. So as we get into the actual damage, the Fire Dragons, of course, blitz this Chimera and just kill the Scout Sentinel. The part that we were not expecting was that Fuegan, when he shot at the Rogal Dorn, would roll a natural 6. So he didn't even need to pop an aspect token in order to make sure that the shots went through. And Fuegan, by himself, hits twice, wounds twice, and then when I fail both saves, because they're on 6s, does 20 damage by himself to the Rogal Dorn, and this Rogal Dorn just dies. Other funny things that happen on this turn, this Avatar comes over here, sweeps into the Kasrkin, but because the Avatar is only AP2 on the sweep, he hands me he rolls a lot of 1s to wound. He hits every single time, but he rolls like 4 or 5 1s to wound, and I roll like 6 out of like 7 5-ups. So the Avatar comes over, kills basically no Kasrkin. Kasrkin also throw a Melta Mine, and the objective that I hold on this turn is not this one, it's not this one, it's this one. Because I have enough Kasrkin that they are able to just hang out on that objective, make themselves OC2, and take away Nick's natural on this turn. I also, I think I fail a Battle Shock, over here, I think. But anyway, so I get a 15, and then I get a 5, whereas I held Nick to a 0 on primary. From this position, it's all about what I can do to make sure that the primary lead stays. So the Wave Serpent that's hanging out here, I have a giant unit of Cadians here. I have the Kasrkin that fell out of the Chimera. I have the other Rogal Dorn over here that did not get tagged, but there was a unit of Kasrkin that was here that fell out of a Chimera, and so there's Lycus and a couple of her friends here. There's some Swooping Dragons or Swooping Hawks here. Asterman is over on this side, and then I still have most of this unit of Kasrkin, and there's some Swooping Hawks and maybe some more Warp Spiders somewhere over here. And then I have part of the Cadian Castellan and the Cadian Command Squad unit here. And then there's Banshees on this objective. And this is where, so we had our first funny roll, right? Rolling the 6 on the star engines to get this over here. The second funny roll was the Avatar just absolutely whiffing into the Kasrkin and me getting this 5 on primary over here. And we're about to get to the third funny roll. So my big thoughts here are, if I can hold, oh, Nick was not a 5, this was a 0. If I can hold him to another 0 and set myself up for even like a 10, I'm going to be so far ahead on primary that there's not a ton that Nick is going to be able to do to bring the game back. So in order to set that up, I take this unit of Cadians and I take like basically all the las guns end up being like here so that they can see if I end up killing the Wave Serpent that they can just shoot the Fire Dragons to death with las guns. And then I spread the rest of the unit out over here so that basically all the Plasma and the Melta are going to go into the Avatar, because when I fall these Kasrkin back over this way, or to make sure that there's no opportunities for like a rapid ingress on this objective, the Avatar ends up reactive moving forward this way, which we both agree was the correct play. However, this is the third funny roll. I end up taking the Cadian unit here, and I shoot both Melta guns at the Avatar. They're both getting the Melta too. I roll 2 shots with Melta, and I roll 2 6s, meaning I get 4 hits. Okay. Then I roll to wound. I get 2 wounds through. Nick fails 2 saves, rerolls one of them, fails it again. Still 2 failed saves. So instantly, I'm doing 4, because the halving damage happens before the Melta 2 is added. I do 4 plus basically 2d3. And then I end up rolling an additional 3 damage. I also roll a grenade for, I think it's 4 damage. So, I mean, 4, 8, 11 damage. He had taken a Melta Mine for probably like 1 or 2. And then I just shoot at him with a ton of Plasma overcharge, which is still, it is halved down to 1 damage, but I wanted the extra pip of AP. And then I just roll a bunch of sustained hits with my Plasma, pass him like 5 saves. And he needs to pass every single one. And I don't remember how many he passed, but he did not pass enough. So because I rolled double sustain on my Melta guns, suddenly the Avatar of Cain over here is just gone. And this Cadian unit is able to, when I fail to kill the Wave Serpent, just charges over this way, and I just full wrap this Wave Serpent with Kasrkin and Cadians. At the same time, I kill everything but Lycus, so it's just Lycus. I think I kill like 2 Sweeping Hawks, so I think there's like 3 of these guys. And I once again hold Nick to a 0 on his next turn. The Wave Serpent then has to run away over here, and because he fall back, he's not able to get the Fire Dragons out, but the Wave Serpent is safe. I set myself up to fairly comfortably hold this objective and potentially this objective, because I think this is when I like charge the Rogal Dorn into like Lycus and barely touch the objective or something to that effect. But I end up getting another 10. Nick ends up getting another 0. And then on the next turn, because I am uninteractable, I have like a Rogal Dorn that nothing in his army can kill over here. I have sticky this objective again. I end up getting another 15. And Nick just runs out of assets because he cannot hold more than me at the end. So he does hold like 2 in No Man's Land for 10 points of primary at the very end. Meaning that Nick only scores a total of 10 primary this entire game, whereas I scored a total of 45 primary on hidden supplies. Now, what are the teachable things about this game? 1, pre-measure the Wave Serpent. Know what the threat ranges are. Nick said that like most players, I was being even more cautious than a lot of other players being, saying that if you roll a 6, the Wave Serpent will be able to do the thing. A lot of players would say if you roll a 5 or a 6, but know where the Wave Serpent can get to. If you are capable of losing a Dorn that turn, you need to know that you are capable of losing it. And then you need to have a plan for what to do after the Dorn is dead. 2, if you are a stronger primary player, if you are a stronger primary army, you need to create those opportunities for yourself to win on primary. Ask your opponent how they are limiting your primary. You need to put things on objectives, you need to do it relatively early, and you need to be ready to absolutely crush them. Anything that comes out to try and deny your primary needs to be dead on the next turn. And 3, know when the boards are favorable. I think this mission plus board combination is very favorable for me. The tools that Eldar have are really good at killing vehicles. They're pretty decent at killing hordes of low OC things. And they're pretty good at killing other MSU, but they're not all that good at killing really big bricks of things. It's part of why Orcs is a really hard matchup for a lot of Eldar. So by forcing my opponent to deal with the bricks, being ready to come out with the unit that is over here in order to go stand over here at some point is really, really important. The one other thing that I do want to point out that a lot of people kind of forget about is the importance of blocking out rapid ingresses. Throughout a bunch of my games, I end up spending a lot of units to block out opportunities for my opponent to rapid ingress onto these objectives. I really did not want Nick to be able to put like a unit of Swooping Hawks rapid ingress onto this objective and potentially be scoring primary that way. He didn't put anything over here early either, so even without being there, I needed to spend a unit in order to go stand something like this to make sure that there's no opportunity for a rapid ingress here, no opportunity for a rapid ingress here, and just making sure that your opponent cannot use any tricks to stand on objectives that you potentially weren't thinking about. That's also one of the reverse of that is also be looking for those if you have things in Deep Strike like Scions or Aquilons. If your opponent doesn't stop your rapid ingress and you can score primary with it, I mean, that's better than most things you could do with the Aquilons. If you can score 5 points for 1 CP, you should almost always do it. But this game overall ended up being a pretty big win. It was an 87-43 for me. Good matchup, good mission, good terrain, ended up all compounding in a way that even when he rolled the 6 on those fire dragons in order to come kill my Dorn, it was not enough. I was still too good on primary in comparison to the Aeldari. For my 5th round, I ended up playing up against Justin and his Tau Empire Kroot Hunting Pack, and it was a very unusual list, something that I haven't really seen before. He was playing an Ethereal, 1 unit of Kroot Carnivores, 1 individual broadside battlesuit with the all missiles, a Hammerhead gunship, 2 rail gun Hammerhead gunships, 1 ion cannon Hammerhead gunship, 1, 2, 3 units of Krutux Rampagers, 3 units of 3 Krutux Riders, 1 Pathfinder team, 2 Skyrays, and then 2 units of stealth suits. This is a very unusual take on Kroot Hunting Pack. It's not an army I see very often in general. And the last time that I played up against Kroot Rampagers was going up against Donald Plummer and his auxiliary cadre, which I think in general is probably the better place to play this because it gives Krutux Rampagers access to advance and charge, whereas in the Kroot Hunting Pack, you give them access to 5-up invul and shooting, 6-up invul and melee. Then you also back it up with just a lot of high-quality shooting between the Hammerheads and the Skyrays. Justin and I played this game on Take and Hold Tipping Point, and we happened to get this one on Games Workshop Layout 8. Justin said that this was also his first time going to an event, so the fact that he was playing me in round 5 was very impressive. He had 3 wins and 1 draw, so for someone at their first event, basically making the finals of a GT compared to most events, really impressive, so well done to Justin. However, there were some holes in Justin's game plan that I was able to capitalize on pretty effectively. This matchup is one where Justin's only tools for dealing with my big Cadian bricks are the Rampagers. He needs to get a couple of big charges off. He needs to get the Rampagers into the Cadian Castellan bricks and chew up all of those bodies relatively quickly because the Hammerheads and the Skyrays simply do not have the volume to kill any of these Cadian bricks. Whereas on my side, my entire game plan comes down to I will lose my Dorns. I am okay with my Dorns dying as long as each of them kill a unit of Krutux Rampagers, which is really weird to say because these Krutux Rampagers are 170 points. They are a 100-point trade down for the Rogal Dorn. However, they're the only unit in his army that I care about. Also, because this is layout 8, I chose to start both Cadian Castellan bricks on the board, and the only thing I put in reserves for this one was the Rough Riders. But I ended up going second on this, which I felt was pretty okay for the way that I wanted to play the game. Justin starts off by drawing Cleanse and Establish Locus. And he ends up taking like 1 unit of Krutux and like it comes over here and does Cleanse here. The other unit of Krutux Rampagers pushes up relatively safely, something like this. And then the last unit of Krutux Rampagers, they actually come out and touch this objective, but they choose to do Establish Locus instead of Cleanse. Small thing here, because he did not have the activation count in the right places in order to do both Cleanse and Establish Locus. If you're going to do your secondaries, you should just choose to double Cleanse, right? Because first Cleanse is worth 2, second Cleanse is worth 5, and then Establish Locus in the middle is only worth 2. And then part of it is like 2 plus 2 is less than 5, but also you just discard Locus and you gain a CP for it. I don't remember if his Ethereal rolled a command point for him or not, but it's still just like, just take the extra point. It's 1 extra point, and you sometimes get a command point out of it. Big thing that I wanted to do, going back into the I will trade everything in my army in order to kill these Krutux Rampagers, because they are the only units that will ever kill the Cadian Castellan bricks. I ended up taking like a Chimera that had like scouted to here or something like that. And then I just took it out, dropped Kasrkin out over here, just in order to kill like 2 or 3 of the Krutux Rampagers, with the full expectation that I was going to lose the Chimera, and I was also going to lose the Kasrkin on the clapback. With the rest of my army staged up, I put like a Chimera like hiding over here. I touched like a couple of Cadians here, and then the rest of them were hiding here. There was a Dorn here. There was another Dorn hiding over here. And then this Cadian brick had like taken up some space here. The other really big thing is I had sabotage in bottom of 1, which I maybe could have put like something small in here to do it, but I had the Catachan unit here, and instead of doing sabotage, I thought it was more important that I create a screen, and so I moved, and advanced these guys to be something like this, okay? With the idea that if he were to have like a Krutux Rampager here, or Krutux Rampager here, it was going to be a really long charge in order to get to the Cadians over on this side. Also, other idiosyncrasy with the terrain that we were playing on, there was not enough space here for a Krutux Rampager to actually fit. But when we get into the turn 2 of Justin, I think some of the newness to playing at events end up showing through. Because I had the unit at Catachan that was like here, I had like a Chimera somewhere, something like this, and then Kasrkin over here as well. And then the first unit of Krutux Rampagers came out to around here. This like half-strength unit of Krutux Rampagers came out something like this, and then the unit of Krutux Rampagers that were over here came out to be something like this. And then he took like Sky Rays and Hammerheads and the Krutux Riders, and he just entirely killed this unit and this unit. And I think also killed this Chimera in shooting, I think. And I had also rapid ingress like horses over here such that there was nothing that could shoot them. And I think some of this newness comes from the fact that this was like a 4-inch charge, maybe like it wasn't very far. This was like, you know, like a 3, and this was like maybe a 5, and this was like maybe a 4. And then this was a 10. Or maybe it was an 11. It was far. And then the charge over here to get like into these Cadians was like also like an 11. Like they were all really far charges. But because Justin shot all of his easy charges to death, and also is showing me all of the Krutux Rampagers, this unit ends up just getting stranded. This unit ends up just being stranded. This unit also ends up being over here, and all of these units of Krutux Rampagers just end up being stranded in the middle of the board. And I even expressed to Justin, like in real time, I think the game is over. And I even said, I'm going to do what I can to kill every single Krutux Rampager, and then you can kill my Dorns back, but you will never kill my Cadians again. So like the Dorn that was here ended up like sticking his barrel out over here. This unit of Rough Riders like hedged its bets a little bit in order to try and charge a couple of different things. Dorn that was hanging out behind moves up, made sure it was within 18 of this unit of Rampagers. The Cadian brick that was here hopped out like over this wall. This Cadian brick that was like spread out over here came this way. The Chimera with Kasrkin, the Kasrkin hopped out over this way because there's a Hammerhead over here. And then on my turn, I killed every single Krutux Rampager here. I killed every single Krutux Rampager here. I killed every single Krutux Rampager here. The horses were able to charge the Iron Rail Head, or the Iron Hammerhead, Ion Hammerhead over here and swing charge their way into some of the Krutux Riders. I think I left like 2 Krutux Riders over here, like the ones with guns. And then I tagged 1 Hammerhead, 2 Hammerhead, 3 Hammerhead, and then I think the only vehicles that were like not touched were like a Sky Ray over here and like another Sky Ray over here. And I couldn't die. From that point, like there was nothing that could kill me. I think I lost like the Chimeras, and I definitely lost all of the Rough Riders over the course of the rest of this game. But we were at a point where the battle lines were like here, right? And it's really important that the battle lines were past like this objective. Like I was able to get like Kasrkin that I'd reinforced, and they came over here. I rapid ingress them, and they like hopped onto this objective on the next turn. I actually held Justin to a 0 because the Kasrkin that were in combat over here end up like falling back onto his home objective to not only deny defense stronghold, but also to take his last objective away at the same time. This game, kind of like my game up against Anya, functionally ended on turn 2. And a major part of that is I had a better understanding of how our armies interacted than Justin did. There were a couple of things here. One, this is a really important primary mission, right? Primary is going to be a huge part of how much you score or don't score. And my primary was going to be dominated by how my Cadian units are doing. Like, are they okay? Are they active? Are they getting stickies off on the objectives that I need them to? And as long as both Cadian bricks are active, I am winning. However, my Dorns do not have the same kind of control over the game. They don't really win. Just kind of like my game going up against Bailey, I lose the shootout. If my Dorns get into just like shootouts with his hammerheads and his skyrays, I'm going to lose the shootout. I do not want my Dorns to be shooting at his tanks. I want my Dorns to be removing the threats to my Cadians. And if I can get rid of the threats to my Cadians, I'm going to win by tagging everything and making basically the entire army hit on 4s or 5s with really low volume of attacks. So in this game, what Justin needed to do is I think he needed to flip the game plan. It's not going to be the Rampagers and the Krutux Riders that are coming out first. It's the Hammerheads and the Skyrays, right? Imagine if instead of the Krutux Rampagers coming out being something like this, and he lost like, I don't know, 2, maybe 3. We'll say he lost 3. He lost those 3 Rampagers for 2 victory points on Established Locus. It could have been 3 if it was Cleanse instead, but he traded basically a Krutux Rampager per victory point that he got. Now imagine instead if it was a Hammerhead with a Railgun that had done that instead. One, it's not trivial for my army to kill Hammerheads. They are still a fair number of wounds, and they have a 3-up save, but Kasrkin, between a Melta mine and a grenade, they're going to do about 7, and then I still need to do quite a bit of wounding on 5s and 6s with the rest of my Kasrkin shooting. It's not trivial for me to remove that piece. Then after that, once the Hammerhead is finished interacting with the Kasrkin, then you bring out the Krutux Riders, not the Krutux Rampagers, the Krutux Riders, because they have enough shooting and enough melee that they will be able to probably deal with enough of the Kasrkin and tag up the Chimera afterwards, such that these units are not going to be really active. So my next wave still can't really be my Cadian Castellan bricks because they are still afraid of the Rampagers. As long as the Rampagers are staged somewhere like here, or like maybe here, or as aggressively as they can be here, I still can't really bring the Cadians out to deal with these threats. I'm going to do it with the Dorns next. So when the Dorns come out, the Dorn comes out, Dorn over here comes out in order to deal with all of these tools. Then he starts using the Hammerheads and the Skyrays, and eventually I do have to use the Cadians by turn 3 probably. The Rampagers have been waiting the entire game in order to get these off, and then he could potentially run me over that way. But he has to play the game almost in reverse. Use the parts of the army that feel like the long-range pieces, say they do not have relevant profiles for me actually being... Say they do not have the relevant profiles I need to win this game, they are the pieces I'm going to be giving up first. As it was, playing the normal plan of the army of the front to back with the Rampagers first, the Riders second, and then the tanks coming out last, ended up being the exact order I wanted his army to come out in, so that I could use my Dorns, I could trade my Dorns to kill the Rampagers, and because I was able to tag all of the tanks up anyway, his tanks were not even really able to shoot at my tanks. I ended up winning this one 87-52. And that was my 10th GT game win in a row, because I had one more game to play. Now, I won't lie, at this point, I had not been sleeping super well for this event. I had been waking up quite a bit during the night, and I had struggled to get back to sleep. I was feeling tired. I was not sure if I even wanted to play a 6th game. There's a real part of me that was like, what if I just drop and then let the other 2 undefeated players, because there was Tim, my teammate, who was playing Ultramarines, and then Nick, who was playing Adeptus Sororitas, and I could just let them play the finals. But there were enough people that had stuck around that they convinced me, like, yeah, you should go ahead and do it, see if you can find some caffeine, and then get the game going. So for my last game, I ended up playing up against Nick and his Champions of Faith sisters. Nick was playing Morvenn Vahl, 3 Hospitallers, 1 unit of 10 Battle Sisters split into 2, 3 units of 10 Celestian Sacrosants, 1 unit of Dominions split into 2, 3 Castigators, 1 unit of Paragon Warsuits, 2 Immolators, and then 2 Rhinos. Nick and I played the last game of the event on Terraform Crucible Battle, and we were assigned Layout 1. Everybody who was playing the last round played on Layout 1, but it was only 2 games. There was my game versus Nick, and then Tim got the pair down into our other buddy Ken, who I've had a couple of times, or I've talked about him on this channel a couple of times. Big reason why this happened was that Ken had already played Nick, because I was originally supposed to be playing up into Tim. But because we had Ken come back in order to make sure that everybody who was undefeated got to play a 6th round, there was a repair, and I ended up drawing Nick. Both Nick and I were very sleepy at this point. Both of us were moving a little bit slower than we probably would have. But I still think we played a pretty decent game for the most part. And I think I made the game-losing mistake in the top of 1. So in Terraform, you naturally have to go, and you need to do actions on objectives, and you will score points for every objective that is terraformed at the end of each given turn. And in top of 1, I drew Cleanse and Overwhelming Force. Now, naturally, Cleanse and Terraform are both actions you need to do on objectives, and you can only do one action with one unit. And so I went back and forth a little bit, because I had like a unit of Catachan that was here, and as always, if you have scouts and you go first, just scout directly at your opponent immediately, because you can always go backwards, but sometimes you won't be able to go as far forwards if you don't scout directly at them. Scout Sentinel here, scouted 9, Catachan, something like this, scout 6, and then I had the big Cadian brick, something like this. Between Cleanse and Terraform, the game was asking me to do 4 actions in No Man's Land on the top of 1. And I should have told the game, that's too bad, I'm not going to do that many actions. Because what I probably should have done is these Catachan came out, and these Cadians move themselves to touch this objective. I ended up doing 2 actions over here. I think that was correct. However, I took these Catachan and I strung them out something like this. And I also put the Scout Sentinel on the objective, somewhere over here. And then I did both actions on this objective as well. And I think that was a mistake. What I should have been paying more attention to is, in order to get onto this objective, on turn 1, Nick was going to either have to give me something real or roll in advance, so he was not going to have something cheap, something that he wanted to do the terraform on this objective with. Meaning that I was probably going to get at least 2 points, but could be way more points by terraforming this objective on the top of 1. As it turns out, I scored 2, 4, at least 5, maybe 6 points of terraform on this objective before Nick had the spare actions necessary to counter terraform this objective. But what I think I was supposed to do is I was only supposed to do terraform the middle objective and keep this Scout Sentinel alive by maybe moving it back to here, maybe tucking it like over here somewhere, putting it somewhere relatively difficult to get to, instead of putting it in the middle where it ended up just dying. So instead of getting a 0 in Overwhelming Force and then 5 for Cleanse, I probably am supposed to take just the 2 points on Cleanse and accept that my terraform here in the middle is probably worth about 4 points. Because what happens on the next turn is I go for a lot of charges and I tie up a lot of Nick's army. He has like a Rhino and like an Immolator and like a Castigator here. There's like an Immolator and then like a Rhino, something like this. There's another Castigator over here. There's a Castigator here. And I end up tagging basically all of it. I end up charging a Chimera, something like this, and then the unit Catachan that was here ended up charging, and so we have like a unit of Catachan here. So this is more or less cordoned off. The unit of Sacrosants that is like here, or no, sorry, like I think they're in this Rhino, could come and do things. But I also took like another Chimera that was staged like over here, and it moves here, and it tags like both of these things. Okay, so I tag like a bunch of his army. I really limit his ability to do a lot of movement. But in order to get from hostile objective, these Sacrosants that started behind this ruin advance. They get the plus, I think it's +1 move, so they move like 7, and then he uses a miracle dice to advance them 5. So they just move 12 inches and touch his middle objective. But they don't counter terraform it. Okay? And then My response to this is I take the unit of Cadians that are here because they are not, there's nothing in reserve for my opponent, no way for him to put anything in reserves. They were all just like right up against this wall. They hop out this wall, and my expectation, having shot or like looked at the map at this fairly heavily, is that this Cadian unit is expected to kill somewhere between 7 and 9 Sacristans. It's a lot of lethal sustained las guns. Then you have like 12 or 14 shots, realistically, of plasma. Then you have the Ripper gun. So it's just a lot of saves that you're forcing your opponent to make. And yes, there are 3 or 4 ups depending on what you're shooting with, whether or not they're in cover. But when you're shooting more than 50 las gun shots with lethal sustained, you're still going to be asking them to make a lot of saves. But I think the real key here is if I had the Scout Sentinel here, instead of having lost it on this objective right away, and this Scout Sentinel comes out as well, I can get this Cadian Brick to start rerolling ones, which pushes the math from like probably 7 to 9 to probably 9 or 10 Sacristans are going to die to this Castellan Brick. As it is, well, I actually rolled pretty decently on my attacks into this unit. I think I definitely rolled above average in terms of the number of saves I asked Nick to make me. Nick also rolled above average on the number of saves that he actually made. So I think I killed about 4 or 5, which is definitely well below the average of what I was expecting. And the game was actually pretty tight for a lot of the duration. I've consistently felt that Nick was going to be in a better position, and Nick consistently was feeling that I was in the better position, which made me feel a little bit better. But basically, my primary started off high and decreased as the game went on, whereas Nick's primary started off really low but increased as the game went on. And we were drawing about the same on secondaries. One of the big mistakes that I did make with this Cadian Castellan brick is I'm very confident I was supposed to use Inspired Command in order to give it +1 save. So I would turn their 5-up saves into 4-up saves, and then with all the shooting between the Immolator, the Castigator, and I think he shot 3 Castigators, definitely at least 2 Castigators in this unit. Giving myself those 6-up saves does mean that I end up having a lot more guys at the end, instead of just every successful wound that my opponent rolls is just a dead dude. And when you have like 20 dudes, getting an extra like 4 or 5 of them because you start rolling 6s ends up being a really big deal. Playing into Sisters and playing into Sacristans in particular, they're very scammy, right? Like the dice goes really heavily one way or another because it is 3-up, 4-up invul, 5-up feel no pain, and then you have miracle dice on top of that. So sometimes they just die. You roll a lot of 1s and 2s on your saves, and then there's just too many feel no pains and you're not going to make that many of them. Other times they live forever because you make all your 3 or 4-up invul saves. But I think once again, going back to it, losing this Scout Sentinel early and not giving myself the best math possible in order to try and deal with the Sacristan unit in top of 2 is, I think, the biggest mistake that I made, just losing an extra unit too early. I generally liked the way that I approached this in terms of like making sure that there was a cordon over here so that I could hold this objective much more regularly in the first couple of turns. And even the pressure that I was able to put on over here by like tagging things with the Kasrkin and the Chimera, and just having units over here in order to hold down my opponent's primary for a while, I think that game plan was generally pretty good. But I think losing the Scout Sentinel and making the math not work out in my favor quite as well was really big. There was one time after this that I got really lucky because Nick was shooting like a bunch of Meltas and Castigators and stuff over at a Rogal Dorn that was like on this objective, and he had already put an Immolator and already put a Castigator into it so that all of his shots were +1 AP ignoring cover, meaning that every time he rolled a 5 or higher on his Meltas, I just didn't get a save. And he rolled 1-5, I think, the entire time with like a Melta pistol, so it was like D3 +2. So I got really lucky that the Rogal Dorn survived as long as it did, but he ended up charging it and it kind of hung out for a little bit. But the other thing that was really funny to me was I took like a unit of Rough Riders, they like Rapid Ingress somewhere over here, and they came to go charge a unit of Sacristans that were on this objective. And one of the guys who was watching saw my dice rolls. I was able to get 6 of the Italian Rough Riders in. They swung with their frag lances because you just wanted the volume of attacks. And so I get 6d6 attacks. I roll 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 3. On 6d6, I rolled 10 attacks. The average that you are expecting for number of attacks on 66 is an average of 21. So I rolled slightly under half of what you would expect the average to be, which was not the reason why I lost, but it was just one of those, oh, okay. But towards the end, like I said, because my primary did like this, and Nick's primary went like this, one of the reasons why Nick thought that he was in a really rough position as he was looking at the score was on his turn 4, he forgot to give himself the fact that he was holding 3 objectives, so like this, this, and this, where he got an extra 12 points. He forgot to put that in his app. So he thought he was just 12 points further down on primary than he really was. And then he put that in, he was like, oh, okay, wait, no, this game is a lot closer than I thought it was. But I think in general, that was my biggest worry, was I did not see a way, after I had like whiffed into the Sacrosants here multiple times, I did not see a way to stop Nick from getting at least 12, and then however many points of like the terraform actions on objectives afterwards. Because realistically on turn 5, this is like +5, and this is generally plus like 3 or 4. So like this is 15, 17, so this is like 32 points of primary that you're really expecting to see in like turns 4 and 5. And that's exactly what happened. And so we just figure out with Nick's like, hey, if you draw 4 points of secondaries, we get a draw. If you draw 5 points of secondaries, you win. And so he draws tempting target, no prisoners, and it's like, nice, that's an easy 10 points of secondaries. Well done, sir. Overall, I still feel like I played this game pretty well. I think, again, the only major blunder that I made, I think, was, again, Scout Sentinel on the top of 1. Because it meant that I had to put way more resources into actually removing the Sacrosant unit relatively early, when I would have loved to put a little bit more of the damage, because I had like a Chimera and like Kasrkin over here that I'd also put to like shoot at them. I really wanted this to be able to shoot over this way into like the Immolator, Rhino, Castigator that was all standing right behind it. But because I never got any of that bonus damage off into these units, because I had lost an extra unit early, which meant that I couldn't do some actions and some other things later on in the game, it all ended up compounding overall. And at the same time, I think Nick played an incredibly clean game. I think maybe he underestimated his ability to just like deploy things here to start, because I did not want to put a Dorn over here to like pop out and like take this long range duel, because then I'm going to be eating like 3 Castigators immediately shooting back at me with Immolator support. But I think he played well, and I think he deserved to win the event with the way that he was playing, because I end up losing this one 81-87. And with that, Nick ended up getting first at the event, but my buddy Tim got second, I got third, and then my buddy Ken got fourth. So deep striking and taking second, third, and fourth at this event. I think for me, the biggest thing that I want to work on going into future events is my stamina by the time I got to round 6 completely shot. I was so tired. And I think both Nick and I are of a caliber of player where our autopilot is still going to beat a large majority of the players. But I would also like to not have to play that last game on autopilot, because I think it made my ability to adapt to things on the fly way more difficult. So that's going to be something I'm going to be working on over the next couple of months, is probably just like working out a little bit more, making sure to stay hydrated, making sure to eat during these events a little bit better. And hopefully that'll help me push over the hill for these longer events whenever we're going to around 6 or potentially even more. But at the end of that, this is going to be my last event, I believe, of the 2025 year. I might go to like an RTT. Other than that, I don't have anything on the immediate calendar. The next event that I believe I'm signed up for is in February, and then we'll go from there. So it should be a really fun 2026 overall. I do have a couple plans for videos, depending on when this comes out. If the roundtable for the Grizzled Company hasn't already come out, it will be coming out in the next couple of days. I'll be doing a breakdown of the expected balanced data slate that's going to be coming out this week. And then depending on what that data slate actually contains, we are going to be talking about a bunch of different units, potentially reevaluating some, potentially talking about units like the Cadian Castellan command brick that has been so good over the past couple of months, and whether or not that survives will, of course, change how excited I am to actually do that video. For now, though, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the After Action Reports, and we'll see you guys all next time. Bye-bye.